Welcome everybody to another episode of Plymouth Culture's New Business Models. And today I'm talking to Ash and Angie Barker in Winson Green in Birmingham. Full disclosure here, they run the New Begin Community Trust, which is set up partly in memory of my father, who was a minister in Winson Green in Birmingham. About 10 years ago, I met Ash and Angie when they started New Begin House, which was the beginning of what's now becoming a much bigger interlocking group of activities, all faith-based, but all having a big impact on the community. So I'm going to ask you, Ash and Angie, just tell us a little bit about how you got going and how New Begin House transformed into the New Begin Community Trust.
Thank you, John. And we're really grateful for your family's support of us. We certainly wouldn't be here doing what we're doing without you. And so Winson Green is inner city Birmingham. It's a challenging neighborhood in lots of ways. And our experience has been working in neighborhoods, looking for what's strong to fix what's wrong. And we did that in Melbourne, where we're from originally, for 10 years in a majority refugee neighborhood. And then 12 years in Bangkok's largest slum called Klong Toi. And then the next transition for us was to be grounded and rooted in a place, but then, try and see change happen, and particularly work for local community leaders and helping them release their talents and gifts. So it's about unlocking those passions and talents. And so when we, there's lots of stories you could tell, but one very quickly in Klong Toi, one of our neighbours, her name was Poo, P-O-O. She was a brilliant cook, but the price of rice went through the roof, and so she couldn't sell her food to the neighbours like she had been doing for years. And so Ange worked with her to start a cooking school and for tourists, and she got them to go to the local market and show them how to. She was just a natural at it. Within 6 months, the cooking school became the number one thing to do on TripAdvisor. Number two was the Grand Palace, and then she did a cookbook. Of course, the cookbook was called Cooking with Poo. Someone put it in the Frankfurt Book Fair, the biggest book fair in the world, and it won the oddest book title of the year. And comedians all around the world picked it up, including Jonathan Ross in this country.
So how did you, Angie, how did you get that going in Winson Green when you arrived? Because it wasn't a neighborhood that you knew, and yet you pulled together all kinds of strands of activity, including animals. There's a blacksmith shop, cycle repair shop. How did all that? How did you begin to connect with the community and get all those things going?
So initially, when we moved to this country, I had a job as the social worker or / chaplain at the local primary school. And my job was to engage the community, and probably wasn't quite a fit for a primary school. But when I decided to engage the community, I thought, well, who lives around the school and how do we gather, firstly, parents and then other neighbours together? And I started to realise there was a deep shame that people were feeling that lived in the neighbourhood, particularly around the fact that Channel 4 show Benefit Street had come out a few months earlier. So people were embarrassed. When you mention Winson Green, people always talk about the prison, which literally is sat right opposite the primary school. And I remember we decided, well, my son's idea was to get some animals because we had this land that had been fly tipped on, and it was... and we were trying to clean it up. It was part of the school. And so we started with a couple of alpacas and just started walking them to and from school. And we realised by walking them to and from school every day, we starting to meet everybody in the neighbourhood. And people who didn't have confidence normally to talk, we looked crazier than everybody. It became a great way to meet the neighbours later. We started with something simple and then let it develop. And we realised very quickly that there was some real gold in the neighbourhood. And we've always approached, like Ash sort of talked about, asset-based community development is kind of been our base. And I think we probably take it a step further and we look at the assets of brokenness. And we believe that what our struggles are and what we've been through is the gift that we have in our hand to bring to our neighbourhood to help others. Cooking's always a big one, big refugee family community where people were landing their first place or being moved up from London as soon as they claimed asylum. And so I'm a terrible cook, so it's always good to have something you need help with. And so that's one of the things we've always looked at is very quickly, what is it that this person can bring to help me? to help us or to help the community, rather than us always doing things to people, allowing them to actually give and use their gifts. And suddenly people feel really needed and start to really buy in and have their own ideas and start to develop. And then the other thing was just, we call it loitering with intent, looking at where in the neighbourhood are those natural bumping spaces where people meet and trying to intentionally go there. And we took over the local park across the road from the school, which was being overrun by prostitution and drugs. And I remember some of the mums sitting there, and we realised, look, there's more of us than them. If we just go there every day after school with all our kids, no one will want to be in there doing trouble because our kids would scare them all off. So that's what we did. So really simple kind of community actions that just spontaneously happened by using people's ideas and then being willing to pivot straight away and go, right, let's do that tomorrow. As soon as somebody has an idea.
So, how have you, in that kind of early stage, how did you keep yourselves going? How did you fund yourselves? How did you start building up the kind of range of different businesses and activities that you've got?
We had some great volunteers. So I'll get Ash to talk about the returners, remainers in a minute. But we had a couple of people who'd grown up in the neighbourhood like this who chose to move back and volunteer with us, some older folk. So that was a really good boost. And then we had jobs that paid us to work part-time so that we could then free our own time up. So I think that's how we've always started. It's not the only way, but it's how we've always known to do it. You put your own time and money in first to put your toe in the water and see if it works. And then once it works, we would start to write little bids for funding, and it's sort of grown. And with every new project, the same happens. We have a little go ourselves, start having people over on a Tuesday night for a community meal that, we just make dinner for everybody. And then when it turns into 30 to 40 people, then we'll write a bid for some funding and go, here's. So rather than starting with the funding and system and the project, is have a little quiet go. And the only way you can do that is by using your own time and resources to start it, to see if it's going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we also had people who knew us and trusted us and believed in what we were doing. So we had a few donors who just kind of got in behind us. They have £1,000. They kind of said, we don't care where we spend it, but we know you'll do it well. And having a little bit of slush fund that you can experiment with and you have permission to kind of try some things with, that really helped. But I think the time is the most important thing, and being able to spend, be available for those kind of moments. Funding has come from different streams over the years, and but yeah, I actually love the donor who just knows us, trusts us, believes in what we do, and will just kind of back us. And those kind of people are gold to us.
The unrestricted funds.
Yeah, that's everybody dreams of unrestricted.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the problems is for so many projects now, everything comes and it's project related, so it's not unrestricted funds. That's a real issue. But listen, both of you, particularly what you've just said, Ash, you make it sound like it's grown very organically, and I can see that it has. You kind of build on what's there. But for lots of people who are building a presence in their community or building a business in their community, having a balance between letting it grow organically and having some kind of purpose and strategic direction is a constant struggle, I guess. And I just wonder how the two of you have managed that.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right, because we are trying to create something positive. And so there is that organic sort of growth that happens as you meet different people in the community and give birth to some of their ideas. But there's also, if the community was going to do it before we arrived, it would have already done it. So you do need to come with a bit of an agenda. So that's kind of the dream you hold. So we talk about kind of this idea of you come into a community or a project or something with the ideal. But true co-production is when in the chaos, we allow the whole idea, the whole concept to be reshaped and the chaos to emerge. And then if you can hang in there long enough, you come out with the new deal. So the new deal is always beautiful. It's always way better than the ideal. But then you think, brilliant, we're sorted. And then the whole thing happens again. And I think in 30 years of this work, we've been through that cycle over and over again. But I think it's learning to realise that when you're in the ordeal, that's not a failure. That's actually you're dealing with the right things. And for me, it means I'm dealing with the right people.
I think the other thing we've tried to do is not hold everything under one organisation. So we often join things. So we join joined the Friends of Black Patch Park, and we were able to redeem the local school, a local park. And then we're able to campaign off the back of that for a new high school and new housing. And so not all of that has to come under New Big and Trust. Sometimes we just join what's existing, or we help start something new that others run.
We help start a lot of things that we've turned into CICs because they can run and just be a small thing.
And when they work together, the best chance of change happens. It's kind of been a mantra for us. And so not trying to build a mega charity in a place like Winson Green is really important. And so that we can support others, we can help start new things.
I know prior to lockdown, a lot of charities like ourselves and our friends in East London put a lot of energy into social enterprise as a way of funding yourselves, and a lot of community asset transfer groups did the same. And then obviously when lockdown happened, that we were all in big trouble in that area. Yeah. And so, you know, we had all our projected incomes from our public speaking or our courses we were running or the lettings of our buildings, and suddenly crashed. So I think what it's really shown us is you have to have a diverse portfolio, to use the business terms, and you can't be too reliant on any one thing because, as we know, the world is, you know, so rapidly changing. But it is a pressure, isn't it? It's a pressure that I wish none of us had, because as if the work wasn't complex enough to constantly not know if you have a job tomorrow. Is a pressure that we live with. But honestly, in my community, that's the kind of pressure my neighbours live with as well. And so we take that as an asset of brokenness, as those of us who work in the charity are also struggling in the same way that some of our neighbours are.
Both you and Ash have referred to social media several times during the conversation. Yeah. Just tell us a little bit about how you use media. I remember you telling me that when the alpacas escaped and ran down the street in the middle of the rush hour, that was the best bit of promotional advertising you could possibly have had. But
like the 2 million TikTok,
apart from having the alpacas on your side, tell us a little bit. You use social media to communicate what you're doing, so I think that would be of interest to people.
Yeah, I think we haven't been good at that, being that bit older. Ash is a bit better than I am. I have young staff who literally take my phone off me because I'm so bad at using it. But we found very quickly there was a young woman who was really good on social media, and we employed her. We employed another teenager from the neighbourhood who started a Golden Ages and over 60s group for our over 60s. And she started doing TikToks with them, and they've become TikTok famous. That was the other thing that really helped the charity. Once we had somebody dedicated to good social media and a younger person. Some of the young people said to us one day, they said, look, don't just include us, let us lead. And that's the scariest thing for us old people to do. Mm-hmm. The way they do what they do and the way they gather a crowd, young people. You know, there's no brochures needed. We don't even need posters. Everything's WhatsApp and TikTok and this and that and be reels. That's how they get the word out for things happening. Sure. And, you know, we're still stuck on Facebook, which apparently only people over 50 do. But that's also where a lot of our donors come from, that age group.
Yeah.
We still have a website, again, because a lot of our donors are older folk who like to come. Look on the website. Yeah, so I think it's really important, and it was always said to be important, but I didn't think it really changed once we started to have regular, you know, we do so much in a week, and then everyone sends their photos to a little WhatsApp group, and then the social media team just pop that up there. And but there are also people who are part of programs, so they don't have to generate it externally. They're also part of things, so they get the vibe. I think that's really key, that employing a social media person who's not present at the activities is a much harder gig. That's kind of the old marketing model. And so our social media person sits at our crazy drop-in centre all day, often looking like she's not doing much, but she understands the vibe, the nuances, the things you can put up there, the things you can't, and also celebrating the things that you know, realising the gold that's happening that you wouldn't necessarily pick up if you didn't understand where the person who's now leading this group has come from, and hearing a bit of their story. So you can then promote it a little bit more effectively.